How we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. On today's show, we're going to be speaking about the shakeup in the wrestling world with the WWE being sold, as well as Vince McMahon coming back in and his daughter Stephanie McMahon stepping out. We're going to talk about Carlos Correa finally finding a home. It is official, he is a Minnesota Twin. With the teardown going on in Arizona with the Cardinals, coach, GM, will they be losing their best player? Looks like DeAndre Hopkins will be on the move this offseason. We're going to speak on that. We're also going to talk about a lot of potential NFL coach movement and stuff that has already happened. We're going to talk about Charles Barkley trying to throw out the olive branch to his dream team teammate and former best friend, Mr. Michael Jordan. We're also going to hit on a little bit of NBA, things that are going on around the league. And towards the end of the show, we've got something a little new. We're going to call it Zappy's Quick Hits. With me always, my co-host, Mr. Mike Zappy. How you doing, bro?
I'm doing very well, man. I'm excited for this morning show or this afternoon show, and I'm also excited for our show tonight that we'll be doing.
Yeah, we got a twofer today. Doing this show, and later on at 6 p.m., we have the Super Wildcard Weekend Preview. If you haven't already, make it a point to hit that subscribe button on YouTube. We're going to start in the wrestling world. Stephanie McMahon out. Vince is in, plus the sale. A lot to unpack here. WWE was a source of a lot of controversy over the last few years, doing pay-per-views in Saudi Arabia. Reason why it's so controversial, female performers were taken off the card because of some of the rules in their country. Very primitive thinking out there, and human rights on a lot of levels, in addition to women's rights, not even in the stratosphere as what we have here in the United States. And I do believe on that level, doing those pay-per-views out there, little shameful on their part. One thing I've learned about this company is that no matter what's going on in the world, they are always going to get theirs, whether it's the pandemic, whether it is a human rights thing. If the money is there, they'll still strike a deal with these kind of countries. Obviously, that has been the case. What is truly interesting about the sale is that the WWE is going private for the first time since 1999. So basically, they've been a public company since the last century. Why is that newsworthy? Well, for one, their stocks are up over 23% now that Vince McMahon is back in the fold. But for wrestling fans, I don't think a lot of people are excited about Vince coming back because from a creative standpoint, I don't believe that was a big thing that the wrestling fans wanted. You're talking about his daughter, his son-in-law, who, Triple H, Paul Levesque, Triple H, stage name, as well as Tony Khan. And it just seems like what is happening here is that Vince is going to stay involved. But it's just not a popular move with a lot of wrestling fans. And essentially, he came back to sell the company. And, a lot of stuff came to be with Vince's 8-month absence due to the sexual harassment allegations. And this is nothing new with WWE in terms of the powers that be. What are your thoughts on any and all of this? This is kind of wild, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I don't have too much to say, just simply because I don't really follow wrestling very much. I haven't followed wrestling in years, as you already know. When it comes to professional combat sports, my main thing is UFC, followed by boxing. But speaking about the Saudi Arabia thing and things over there, with the whole women thing, one thing we have to understand is different country, different culture. And while we might say that's BS about taking women off the card and things like that, No matter how we look at any sport for that matter, we have to abide by those countries' rules. Think about the World Cup. It was in Qatar this year, and there was no alcohol sales, which was huge for soccer in general because that made them take a dip in their profit margin this year. So
Hmm.
that's all I really can say about that. It's just, but as far as what's going on with WWE, I just don't want to say too much about it because I don't know enough about it.
I just think that from a intelligence standpoint or getting one's intelligence insulted, WWE on their previous telecast going back to 2018, 2019 at Crown Jewel, which was the event that they did in Saudi Arabia. This is coming off the heels of an American getting killed out there. There was a lot of controversy. And the Vision 2030 seemed like something that WWE was pushing about how Saudi Arabia was becoming more progressive, which was essentially a lot of shit. It really wasn't accurate. And there's certain things that I think make sense, and there's certain things that don't. But when a wrestling company is getting involved on a worldly political level, it is some of their top performers refuse to go. Guys like Daniel Bryan, guys like John Cena refuse to go to this event because of their strong thoughts. And when you're powerful enough in the company, you can get away with not attending something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see how the immediate future looks. And I will say this, from a financial level, I think the big losers here is actually UFC, because that is their competition. Just like professional boxing could be viewed as a competition, with UFC, professional wrestling also very much so is an opponent of UFC. So I do believe this deal makes things a little more difficult for UFC. And going private, that's bananas after being a public company since 1999. But we'll be keeping tabs on how this plays out. And it also makes me look into the dynamic of what's the relationship like between father and daughter, because the second he steps in, she steps out. And I don't necessarily think that the relationship between son-in-law, father-in-law, daughter is as great as it may be perceived on the outside. But it's going to be interesting to see where this goes.
Yeah, the one thing about that is just I don't know. It's just so hard because I think their relationship is fine when you take away the business aspect of things, but when you're talking about a family working together, you tend to run into some issues like this.
And this
it's
is
no
not just like some small business. You're talking
this
the
is a
McMahons
huge
are
corporation.
billionaires. Yeah, the
Yeah,
McMahons
exactly.
are billionaires. This is one of the most powerful companies in the country when you think about it. People sometimes overlook it because they don't consider it a sports entertainment. But World Wrestling Entertainment on a lot of levels and layers is on the same level of an NBA or an NFL. So yeah,
Yeah,
very.
it's ahead of when you talk about combat sports. I personally think it's number one, followed by boxing number two, then UFC number three. But I mean, they were the foundation, really. If we really break it down.
Yeah, and over the years, kayfabe has switched because you take like old timers, like The Undertaker, for instance. He's a great example. Whenever he would do public appearances, he was always in character. That has softened over the years, but once upon a time, I mean, I remember going back to WrestleMania 3 when Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik were arrested. They're supposed to be enemies on the screen. They were in the car together, and they got jammed up with cocaine. So, like that, from the kayfabe angle, made the sport take a hit. But it's always been intriguing. And at the end of the day, as long as I've been alive, WWE, formerly WWF, has always been a massive part of pop culture. So it's going to be interesting to see the future of where this company goes. We have some quick news here. Tua Tagovailoa has not passed concussion protocol and won't play Sunday. Dolphins coach Mike McDaniel announces that just really diluted, which was already, I think, not going to be a good matchup. Oh, we got it here.
That's gonna change my score prediction for tonight's episode for sure.
Yeah, we got it here quick, and we got it here first. So without further ado, I'm actually going to post this to our page. Unreal. Moving along. Let's get physical. Third time is a charm for Carlos Correa as he stays in the American League after flirting with the Giants and the Mets. Two different reports over the course of a month stated that he did sign with the Giants. Then he did sign with the Mets. It's coming. It has always been a lower extremity injury and the passing of a physical that has concerned both these organizations. In the Mets case, I think it's a little embarrassing, more so than even the Giants, because I think the Mets really overplayed their hand and almost got stuck with this. And, I think Uncle Stevie has a reputation to uphold where he's trying to prove to the baseball world that he could literally just pay for any player at any time and get whoever he wants. So I do believe that that is part of that, because no matter how good the New York Mets are, they are constantly in a battle of relevance because of who they share the city with. That, of course, the New York Yankees, who are the most winningest team in all of sports history. But what do you take from all this? I mean, I think he still did great. 6 years, $200 million. Staying with the team that he was with last year, which he opted out of that contract, which was a 3-year deal. He only played 1 year, opted out. He's back there, though. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think he's worth any of this? I mean, it's half of what he was going to get in terms of years. The previous teams were looking at 10 to 13 years, anywhere in between there, the two previous offers that were thrown out between the Mets, the Giants. This is half of that. This is 6 years, where he's still relatively young when this contract's over. But do you think they're overplaying their hands, bringing in a talent like Correa?
I don't think they're overplaying their hands, but what I want to know is, he gets a 6-year, $200 million deal. He passes his physical today and he signs. What was the difference? What was it that he was able to pass his physical this time? And why didn't the teams like the Giants and the Mets approach him with a similar 5-6 year deal to still be able to retain his ability and bring him onto the squad? Because while he's, as we've discussed many times, his hitting has been over 300 one time. It's not a power hitter by any means. It's the whole why does a guy like him deserve $33.3 million a year? But I get it, I guess. But I'm just confused. I want to know the exact details of how he was unable to pass a physical. Is it an injury that they feel like year 7 it's really going to affect them, but not year 6? Or what exactly is going on?
The way I look at it is, I think given the girth and the magnitude of the monies and the years, I think that's why the Twins aren't tripping over themselves the same way that the Giants nor the Mets would. And I think it comes down to more or less that I don't think this was a debilitating thing that people are going to be like he's finished or anything like that. I think it was more that when you're paying that kind of money and you're getting into the $300 million range, I think the Mets and the Giants got cold feet in the sense that, like, damn, this is a massive investment if this guy's damaged goods. But when you take $100 million off the table, it's still a shit ton of money. I just think that the Twins could justify it a little better. Plus, I think they would be in the know better than any other team, being that he was a member of their team last year.
Yeah.
And, you got to take that into consideration, too, because ultimately, I think Correa, tried to hit a home run, no pun intended. He got turned back, and a team that he was with still, in my opinion, overpaid him. So I still think he did good. And why do I say they overpaid him? This has been a topic that has been floating around on my show as well as other sports podcasts, other sports shows. When I was a guest on Sergio's show, we spoke on this. Sergio brought up some great points, which I co-signed. Never hitting over 40 doubles, only hitting 300 once. Being on the injured list 7 of the past 8 years for something. And Sergio suggested that where Correa got his value, where he truly got his value, was because of his exploits and his heroics with the Astros in the postseason. As we all know, pretty much since the 2017 season, the Astros have been a staple in the ALCS/World Series. They are always in the mix. They have been in the mix since basically 2017. And as much of a storied history as they had in the National League, they've superseded all of that now as an American League team over the last 20 or so years. So very impressive, like him or not. Carlos Correa cashes in off of his exploits with a phenomenal Astros team. And the Houston Astros themselves, until somebody knocks them down, they are still the class of the American League. So, next month, pitchers and catchers report, and Major League Baseball is going to be very exciting. But this was kind of like the last big piece to fall. The Giants struck out on Aaron Judge. He went to the Yanks. They struck out on Correa. They made a couple of other moves, but I feel the Mets dodged a bullet. I still think from a public relations standpoint and from a foolery standpoint, I still think the Mets look a little dumb for even – it's not about dodging the bullet. You should have never been in the path of that bullet. That's kind of how I see it.
I look at it as, we spoke about the American League last night, who we thought would be wild card this year. And it's a good signing for the Twins, because it kind of puts them back over that hump. They made a couple of good moves in the offseason, signing Christian Vasquez and as well as one of my favorite players, Joey Gallo.
Yeah, they brought in Gallo. I think Gallo could thrive there. Pressure's off. Yeah,
but as far as why the Mets and Giants were doing the larger contracts, well, I look at it as they can because of their markets they're in. Minnesota's not in the same market as those two.
Not by any means. But when you can fling a $200 million deal to a top 5 shortstop, I still think the Twins did good. I think the reason I think the Twins did good and why this deal was better for them is because I feel that from a market value standpoint and what I think he's truly worth, I think it's a compromise on both sides. But the 6 years, $200 million pales in comparison to 13, 333 or whatever the hell the Giants are offering him. I think the Mets gave him one less year. It was like 12 years, still in the 300 million range. So yes, in that regard, even though the market is so robust, I think the Twins still get a bargain. And like I said, with this whole injury thing, the Twins know him better right now than any other baseball team because he was with them all of last year. I think the Twins said, let's let him test it. Let's see what happens. And when he got rejected a few times, he came back. And I think both sides win.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree on that.
This is a team that's not winning much of anything lately. And an interesting stat about this organization, with the recent firing of Cliff Kingsbury, no head coach has lasted with the Arizona Cardinals more than 6 consecutive seasons. That is staggering and mind-blowing. Now you're talking they're going to be bringing in a new GM, new direction. Kyler Murray, after a lot of controversy with provisions in his contract about kind of making sure that he studies more. The joke on many a meme about his love of Call of Duty and not his love of being a professional athlete. A lot of things to unpack there, and none of it was positive. J.J. Watt recently retired. This is a team in flux and a team that is going to have to go down before they can come back up, which draws the question of DeAndre Hopkins. On the wrong side of 30, but still one of the best receivers in professional football. He did get hit with a PED suspension this year. That's why he came on after week 6. Still a very productive year, all things considered. And this is a guy that can truly change the culture of an offense, of a team. He's a hell of a talent. Where do you think he ends up in 2023? What do you think are the best destinations for a talent like a DeAndre Hopkins at this juncture of his career, and where he makes sense in terms of who needs him and what he needs in return?
Well, when you look at a player like DeAndre Hopkins, when healthy, he is still one of the top receivers in the NFL. So automatically you have to ask yourself, will he go to just any team, or is he going to go to a team that's either in the playoffs now or right there borderline? When I look at the current teams in the playoffs between the AFC and NFC, I look at 2 teams that really make a lot of sense, and they're both out of the NFC East. That's the New York Giants being one of them, because we have seen it already on full display that while the Giants did finish with a 9-7-1 record, they still need that number 1 receiver to kind of put them over the top. And then the other one that makes sense is Dallas. We're talking about a team that has been looking for another receiver to join that receiving core. And why not take a chance on a DeAndre Hopkins? You also look at the two teams where they're paying Dak $40 million a year. The market is now at $50 million a year, and it's probably going to go up even more this offseason. And then the Giants are going to likely retain Daniel Jones with a contract that'll probably pay in the area of $33 million per a year. And then as far as the AFC, I could sit here and the one team I make a very strong argument for would be Jacksonville, because even though they're getting Calvin Ridley next year, if they can add a DeAndre Hopkins to team up with Calvin Ridley, that could be a very explosive offense next year to go along with a very young team that is only improving. Now, and at the other team in the playoffs, I look at Kansas City. While they did a committee approach this year with receivers, it seemed to pay off, as we saw Patrick Mahomes become the all-time leading passer in passing yards this year. But, those are the four teams I see in the playoffs. As far as teams not in the playoffs, I'll make a strong case for Detroit. Teaming them up with Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jameson Williams, I think would be a trio of very, very good receivers to have on your team. And then, the other team I forgot to mention is Baltimore. They need a true number one. Get help for if it is Lamar Jackson moving forward or not. And as far as the Cardinals go, the other question I have is, while we see DeAndre Hopkins looks like he's on his way out, what are they going to do in the offseason with Kyler Murray? It's the same question that we have right now with Chicago. What are they going to do with Justin Fields now that they have the number one pick? Is Kyler Murray, are the Cardinals also going to look on to possibly moving away from Kyler, as they've already gotten rid of Cliff Kingsbury? Kyler doesn't fit a lot of teams' offense, and we don't even know who they're bringing in as their next head coach and stuff like that. So there's going to be a lot of unanswered questions this coming off season. That
I think Kyler's going to be out of the league in less than 3 years. I really believe that.
It seems that way.
Yeah, I really do believe that. And while we're on the topic of, the turnaround over there in Arizona, the NFL coaching carousel, Lovie Smith out in Houston, as we already mentioned. Cliff Kingsbury out. Looks like Mike McDaniel probably saved his job by making the playoffs this year, but he was very much so on the hot seat with all of the fallout with the Tua situation. I look around the league and say, who's coming back into the league potentially? And there's a couple of names that come out. I think of Jim Harbaugh. Excuse me. Yes, Jim or John.
Jim
I always. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry.
Harbaugh.
Yeah, I know. Former Colts quarterback. I always do that. Jim Harbaugh. I think he's coming back potentially to Indy. And I also think that Sean Payton might be coming back, but I don't believe he's coming back to Denver. I think that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I don't think that he's that interested in that organization. But there are other organizations where I could see Sean Payton making sense. That will remain to be revealed. But what are your thoughts here on coaches in and out of the league right now? Even your guy, McCarthy, first round exit?
Yeah.
12-win seasons, no playoff wins. Can that be cause for a firing? Ron Rivera, another guy.
Ron Rivera, I think, is safe. I think they're going to give him a chance to see what he does with Sam Howell moving forward, because, quite frankly, like I said before, this was a guy that was a top 5 pick until his final season at North Carolina, where he kind of fell back a little and ended up falling to the 5th round. Mike McCarthy, it's quite simple for Dallas, even though Jerry Jones said the right things yesterday, saying, I have full confidence in Mike McCarthy moving forward. Sure, absolutely, you're supposed to say that. Your coach has a game on Monday night. You don't want to distract them from game planning. But if come Monday night, if Dallas is flying home as losers yet again, Mike McCarthy will be fired Tuesday morning, if not Monday night when they land in Dallas.
Yeah, I don't see him surviving if he doesn't get them to the title game, let alone pass round 1.
Yeah, and the other thing is, teams are starting to approach and request permission to speak with Dan Quinn.
Which is no surprise. Wink Martindale's another one. Our DC's been getting attention from some teams.
Yeah, and I don't see a scenario where we lose the first round, maybe even the divisional round, where Jerry doesn't fire Mike McCarthy to assure he keeps Dan Quinn, because we've seen it time and time again. Defensive-minded people tend to win more than offensive-minded. So it's a lot to take in. And then Excuse me. As far as Sean Payton goes, it's hard to see him going to Denver because you can almost guarantee that the Saints are going to be looking for a first-round pick in this year's upcoming draft, possibly next. Denver doesn't have first-round big picks
That's
because
another reason why I don't think that really happens. They would have to dig even deeper into future drafts to
future
accommodate that.
drafts.
And
And
I just don't think he's that interested in going there. I really don't.
no, I think he still is interested to going to Dallas. I mean, this is
Absolutely.
a
He
team
has
where
he
he
has
has a
roots laid
house.
down in Dallas if you
Yeah.
follow his coaching career, because a lot of people will say, "Oh, Sean Payton started with the Giants," which is true, and that was under Jim Fossil. But where Sean Payton truly became the coach that he is was under the watchful eye of Bill Parcells in Dallas.
Yeah.
That's really where the trajectory for his coaching career kind of went up and entered where he became the kind of coach he was going to be. Of course, there's some scandal involved, going back to even Bountygate. Now, granted, that was his defensive coordinator, but he also took a big hit on that. Not to mention,
the team to watch out for, in my opinion, is the Miami Dolphins, because I think Mike McDaniel's gone no matter what.
You may very well be right, and it's pretty wild how the hot coordinator, this and that, and now he could be on the way out. I mean, hell, if Tom Brady doesn't go to Las Vegas, and say hypothetically it was Aaron Rodgers, just hypothetically, I have a hard time believing that Josh McDaniels would be safe there. Having said all that, if Brady plays in 2023, I actually do think he's going to be a Raider. I do believe that. I think the Jets could be in the market for a Derek Carr, Jimmy Garoppolo, possibly a Lamar Jackson. So there's going to be a lot of movement around the league. And then, of course, the Colts have to figure out who their quarterback's going to be. There's the Jets, like I just said, Lamar maybe Jimmy G. And then you have these 49ers, who we spoke on our most recent show. We have two guys on rookie deals that play that position. So there is a lot to unpack in the NFL. And normally these aren't the storylines before the playoffs, but right now they're like really hot.
Yeah, and of course, it's because we just had Black Monday a couple days ago. The other team I say keep an eye out for Sean Payton's services would be the Los Angeles Rams. With Sean McVay giving his entire coaching staff permission to go speak to other teams, and it almost seems like the writing's on the wall. He is going to be gone for at least a year, maybe longer. And the Rams are going to need to go out and find themselves a head coach. They have a win now team, so why not bring in a Sean Payton where his philosophy would fit that team very well?
I beg to differ with the win now. I'm not 100% sure how close to winning they are anymore, because you have no draft equity. You've got overpaid guys everywhere. I actually think if Payton comes in, they're going to tear it down before they bring it back up. I don't think Payton's going in there to babysit overpaid players, and every coach wants to put their own stamp on it, and that certainly wouldn't be his stamp to come in and kind of, nurture, if you even want to call that the right word, the super team or what's left of it. So I don't know. That's going to be very interesting to see what direction the Rams go in, because based on win-loss percentage, they are the worst defending champion in NFL history, and that is just all kinds of wild. I had to make a note of this. Miami Heat made history yesterday, going 40 for 40 from the free throw line. That is something you just never see. In a 1-point win over the Oklahoma City Thunder. That is very impressive stuff. This is an interesting season in the NBA thus far, because when I look at potential MVP candidates, they're not the guys that are usually the guys you think of. Donovan Mitchell, Luka Doncic, in my opinion, are the two front runners right now. Stephen A. Smith, who I don't agree with often, one thing I must say, he's been on the Knicks' case about not getting Donovan Mitchell when they had the chance to pair him with Jalen Brunson as well as Julius Randle. I must say, it is hard to be like, damn, I wish we would have got him no matter what the asking price was, because he is having that MVP caliber year. And when I look at what Luka's doing, that's insane. And then you look at his career trajectory and where he might end up when it's all said and done at this pace, and he could catch potentially LeBron, who, jumping Jabbar and all that. A lot to be excited about with the NBA and the new young stars, because these are two names that quite frankly, weren't necessarily the guys that you would call MVPs this year. And, it's kind of a passing of the torch to a level too, because while Steph Curry still has plenty of basketball in front of him, and while he's more or less the face of the league now that LeBron is kind of backing away a little, Steph is no spring chicken either.
Yeah,
Steph is no spring chicken either. Yeah. And Steph is, Steph is not new. He's been around for quite some time now. I still feel that Steph could play another 6-7 years, but the point is, this is the next gen of NBA players. Those two particular guys that I mentioned, and it's very exciting. And we take it from the new school to the old school. TNT color commentator Charles Barkley wants to end a decade-long silence with former Dream Team teammate Michael Jordan. For those of you who don't know, the beginning of their fallout goes back to Charles Barkley basically tearing up Michael Jordan when he was owner of the Bobcats, now the Charlotte Hornets, and just saying that he was basically doing a crappy job and he had no idea what he was doing. And, Barkley's the type of guy that he doesn't say things very nicely. You can even ask Kevin Durant. They've had beef for years. But he's very honest, Charles is. Now, this is a friend who he values. During the NBA Finals in '93, it was documented on The Last Dance how these two were literally playing golf in between championship games, keeping the competition going. These two were very close, but at the same time, from personality levels, polar opposites, where Barkley was always very outspoken, whereas Michael Jordan was more of a conservative kind of person, being very private, and also veering away from any and all things that had to do with politics, things in the black community, things like just always, Jordan was always doing the stiff arm when it came to those kind of things. He just essentially wanted to be a ball player. But one thing that I've learned about Michael Jordan over the years is that he doesn't take criticism well at all, and he makes it very personal very quickly. I think that's what happened here. They showed them at the all-time NBA 75 ceremony a year ago. They were in the same vicinity. They didn't even so much as look at each other. Barkley has been documented on many shows and just different public appearances whenever the question comes up that it does legitimately bother him that he and Michael are no longer friends. As a fan of both, I hope these guys can, just squash this crap that they have. Life is short. And that's where I'm at with it. I hope that these two in their latter years can make some peace and hopefully regain the friendship that they once had. Your thoughts? What do you think about all this?
Well, it's a case of where Charles Barkley's words did get twisted, because he never said you're doing a trash job. He said more along the lines of, you don't have the proper support to be able to succeed.
And he recently praised Mike because Mike is surrounding himself with better company in terms of what he's trying to accomplish long-term goals with that organization.
Right. And which, when you think about Barkley and what he said, and you fast forward to today, the Hornets have been a team that's been around 423, a winning percentage. So Barkley was right, but he wasn't trying to disrespect Jordan. It's just the way the media can interpret things and change the words around.
But I also think it's the kind of situation where it's your job to cover this stuff, and you're not always going to say, you're not going to spare a person because he's your friend. I think this is the best way to put it.
Well, a good friend will always be honest and not say the things you want to hear. A good friend will always say the things you don't want to hear, for one. So that's the one thing, with Michael Jordan. If he got offended because he was being honest, then, it is what it is. We see it all the time. But this is a situation that reminds me a lot of Jimmy Johnson and Jerry Jones, to be honest with you. Not on the same level, but it's just Jimmy and Jerry were always friends. And then you had the big fallout where Jimmy was like, no, I was responsible for the team of the 90s. And then taking full credit, Jerry didn't like that he wasn't getting the credit, so he fires him after winning the second Super Bowl.
Yeah, it was definitely a pissing contest of two egomaniacs. And the bigger egomaniac was the last man standing, so to speak, in that situation.
26 years that we're counting. So, but I would love to see these two squash it because, growing up watching them play basketball, I loved it. And, I'm a big fan of the teams from the 80s and 90s when basketball, in my opinion, was still great. And to see this, I feel like it hurts because you want to see situations where they just squash it. That's honestly what I want to see. I want to see them squash it, sit down over a Manhattan or an old fashioned, whatever your case may be, and talk it out because it was, to me, it was honestly a situation where words got twisted. And Michael Jordan never really wanted to listen from that point on and let him
In
speak his voice.
to your point about the media twisting things, I think a great example would be the media made beef. And yes, there was some validity that they did have issues, but I think the media took it 6 miles more
Which
with
is
the
their
late
job
great
to do.
Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal. There was a lot of reasonings behind why the divorce happened in LA with Kobe and Shaq. And I think one of the biggest ones was preservation of the organization. Who was going to be able to carry you longer? The answer was easy. It was Kobe Bryant. The results spoke for themselves because while Shaq will always have his place as one of the true Laker greats, and that's the reason why he's retired up there along with Kobe's two numbers of 8 and 24, I think the difference is that the Lakers saw the writing on the wall that Shaq was losing interest in the sport. Because if you look at Shaq's trajectory post Lakers, he had a couple of good seasons as Miami's number 2 man, because that was Dwayne Wade's team. But as soon as the Miami run was over, Shaq got really old really fast in terms of basketball old. And I think a lot of it was predicated off of just not being motivated. This is a guy that didn't win until he had Phil Jackson. His domination over those 3 championship seasons, I think, are comparable more recently before him to Michael Jordan in terms of a dominance factor. In my lifetime, I can say without really thinking about it too hard. No, I'm not including LeBron or Steph. I'm talking about prior to those 2 guys. The 3 most dominant players in my lifetime: Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal. Kobe has a place too, but I'm talking about just utter dominance with like what Shaq did with that three-peat. It was still his team. Kobe was an amazing player, and they don't win without him. They needed both of them. But the ascension of Shaq, once Del Harris moved along and they bring in Phil, Phil has 3 three-peats with 2 different organizations. That is absurd in terms of what greatness looks like. But to bring it back full circle, you made a good point, and that's how the media can misconstrue and screw up a lot of these things. One thing I liked even before the tragic passing of Kobe is that Shaq and Kobe made it known that they were getting along just great, and they stayed good friends. And I think it's important for people to see that. I mean, hell, even Penny and Shaq get along really well, and people tried to blow that into something that it wasn't. Before we get out of here, you wanted to get some stuff off your chest. Zappy's quick hits. Let's go.
Well, as we know, the wild card weekend is upon us. And I think an interesting note to say is the 4 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL are not representing their teams in the playoffs this year. That being Deshaun Watson, clearly a slightly different scenario where if he was around the whole season, they might be in there, they might not. We will never know. But the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, the Cardinals with Kyler Murray, and then the Broncos with Russell Wilson. So,
and I think 5th is Matthew Stafford, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know that for fact, but he's also got a hefty contract, and he's not in there.
I think the 5th one is actually Patrick Mahomes.
Okay.
I'd have to double check that, but either way, what the point I'm trying to make is I have not been a fan of the quarterback value, and I understand it's all about the market, this and that, but we are seeing when you pay your quarterback, it sets your team back. Unless if you have that generational quarterback like a Patrick Mahomes, who happens to have Andy Reid by his side, and a lot of the time with quarterbacks, they usually have that great head coach with them. So I want to say about that, as we have impending free agency also coming, think about it when we're talking about Lamar Jackson, will he get paid and stuff like that. Also, the other thing I wanted to hit on was The 2022 All Pro selections were recently announced in the NFL for the first team, that is. Leading the way was the AFC West with 8 selections. In second was actually the NFC East with 7 selections. Philadelphia leads the way out of the NFC East with, what was it, 3 selections, I believe it was, or 4. Lane Johnson, Kelsey, Darius Slay, and one other. Dallas had 2 with the one. This was a surprising one to me. Zach Martin, and everyone
It
thought
was
it
a
would have been
surprise.
Micah Parsons or Trayvon Diggs, and actually it was Kevontae Turpin, our return specialist. Washington had one with Jeremy Reeves. Congratulations to him, considering everything he's had to go through over his short career. And the other one for the New York Giants. Surprise, surprise, Mr. Comeback Player of the Year, Surprise Player of the Year, Breakout Player of the Year, whatever you want to call him, Dexter Lawrence. So I just want to say congratulations to those guys. And
Yeah,
last,
Dexter Lawrence, man, he has really honed and just circled his game at an elite level. Such a great athlete for a big guy. When you see his frame, he doesn't strike you as a guy who's going to lead the team in sacks and get after the quarterback. And, obviously he's very powerful, but the thing with Dexy is that he could beat you with the finesse game also. So,
right.
yeah, very happy for him. We've lost some big name guys over the years, going back to Linval Joseph, Dalvin Tomlinson.
Snacks Harrison.
Yeah, we allowed Dalvin Tomlinson to move. We're actually going to be seeing him this week. So yeah, Snacks Harrison, true, another guy. But I got news for you, and I don't mean this just because he plays with us currently. I think Dexter's better than all those guys. So very proud of him and what he's been able to accomplish. And I wanted to piggyback off of what you said about some of these quarterbacks. We look at the Aaron Rodgers situation. That's always a prime example to jump into. Yes, Devontae Adams could have made more by staying in Green Bay. He chose to play in Vegas with his buddy Carr. But the point to be made is it is hard when you look at the kind of money that Aaron Rodgers is making. I thought they had a very good draft. When you look at defensively and offensively what they added, I think the Packers are set up for a decent amount of years moving forward. They have a nice foundation. But the question is this for Jordan Love or is this for Aaron Rodgers for a couple more years? And I say to myself, you missed opportunities to win a Super Bowl over the course of the last few years. This year, they took a big regression by finishing the year at 8-9, missing the playoffs. And I say to myself, can they do better? Yeah, they could. But with an emerging Detroit, Minnesota won the division this year. The Bears are still the Bears. They're going to be a mess for a while. But the point to be made is, do I think that the Green Bay Packers could get back to the relevance of being a contender in the next couple of years with or without Aaron Rodgers? I'm going to say no. And I think if Aaron Rodgers wants to continue to play this game, it would be in his best interest to try to get out of town and just get a new start. And I do feel that Oakland I keep saying Oakland, Vegas on a lot of levels makes sense for Aaron Rodgers. It reunites him with the greatest receiver he's ever played with. And they have something there if they bring in a talent like a Rodgers, where I think in Green Bay, sometimes people just need a change and a fresh start. I don't think it's all on Aaron Rodgers. I mean, the man has won 4 MVPs, most recently last season. So it's not like the man can't play anymore. But when I look at the strange dynamic of how old he is in terms of league years versus the players that he's with, his lack of patience, and his dwindling window to add to his legacy and add Lombardi trophies to his trophy case, I say to myself, this might be the time for Aaron Rodgers to move along. And I also think that Green Bay drafted Jordan Love for a reason. And I think it's his time to shine and his time to see if they got it right. Green Bay has hit gold.
And not to mention the comments.
Drafted Rodgers and finding the right guy with Brett Favre prior to him. Brett Favre started in Atlanta. And little known fact, Green Bay also had a quality backup in Mark Brunell, who was not protected for the expansion draft and then went over to the Jacksonville Jaguars as their original quarterback. Actually, their second quarterback, if I'm not mistaken. I think their original was Steve Berline. But the point to be made is,
Berline was a Panther.
oh, okay, I got that twisted then. Point to be made here is that Green Bay has, similar to the 49ers, has always had the blessing of finding the quarterback right away or falling into it. I mean, even this year, 3 quarterbacks? So some teams got the luck like that. Then you have a Cleveland Browns team that, it looked like a criminal receipt when you look at like how many quarterbacks they went through. So some teams have the blessings and some teams don't. But to your point, it has been proven that if your quarterback's making way too much, things are not going to look good. And the grand exception is Patrick Mahomes, because quite frankly, he's the best quarterback in the league. And I think people have gotten spoiled with how good Patrick Mahomes has been. And I understand that the MVP award goes to different players for different reasons. And because you win an MVP award doesn't necessarily mean that you're better than Patrick Mahomes, say, this year or whatever have you. There's many reasons why guys win that award. But I do believe that because of his ascension happening so quickly, people have almost taken for granted how great Patrick Mahomes is. And I think that's the best way to put that.
It is. The one thing I will keep an eye on with Aaron Rodgers is I think his days are numbered in Green Bay. I think he's gonna allow Jordan Love to take over, but I wonder if he's gonna push the retirement button and take a year off and then come
Pull the
back.
Favre.
Yeah,
pull the Favre, and
that's the one I'm looking. I think it's gonna happen. I think he's gonna retire because
it's interesting. It could, but stepping away for a year at his age to come back is not an easy task.
Yeah, but
few have really done it at a high level. Few have been able to do it at a high level, and I would say that the most impressive to pull that off, probably Rob Gronkowski, probably Deion Sanders. I mean, when Deion came back to Washington, he wasn't the player that he was with Dallas. Excuse me, when he came back to Baltimore, I should say. He wasn't the player that he was with Dallas or the 49ers. But the fact that he was still able to do it spoke volumes of the kind of superior athlete he truly was. I mean, you're talking about a man who, could have wrote his ticket in baseball. And, part of his stubbornness as to why he stuck with baseball as long as he did is because he couldn't master it. I saw a really cool interview with him on the Club Shay Shay show, of course, Shannon Sharp. And that was a cool show because Deion was talking about how football came so easy, baseball didn't. And the reason he stuck in baseball so long is because he wanted to master it. But like everyone else, even a guy like a Michael Jordan, some people feel that if the strike doesn't happen, maybe Mike would have went pro in baseball because it wasn't just smoke and mirrors and his name. He was improving. And even the great manager currently of the Cleveland Guardians, Terry Francona, will speak on that.
Yeah. It's gonna be a fun offseason. That's all I'm gonna say. Last note I wanted to make is on actually, as the World Cup has just completed recently, fresh off of everyone's mind, Lionel Messi. This was expected to be his last World Cup, and because that was the missing piece for his resume, really. Well, Argentina's head coach Lionel Scaloni believes that Lionel Messi will, in fact, play in the 2026 World Cup. A lot of that being because it is here in North America, where games will be played in Canada, Mexico, as well as the United States. So I think it'd be nice to see him come back for one more rodeo. And it would also we would see maybe a Cristiano Ronaldo come back and try to get his. So
well, with one, it's hard to believe that you won't draw the other. Like if this is a hockey comparison, that would be like Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin. You want to take it back to that generation, Gretzky, Lemieux, Messi. So, yeah, very exciting. Before we get out of here, we were talking off air about this, I think it was last night, with baseball on the horizon. And each of our teams having pretty successful off seasons, the Yankees and Rangers respectively. Who do you think you need, or what position is the most of need for you going into the new season? And I'm going to hit you with what I think we need.
So the position I think we need is outfielder. We did a very good job of addressing the pitching rotation this offseason, bringing in DeGrom, Heaney, Eovaldi from the Braves. So they still have John Gray in place as well as Martin. The one player that I think makes the most sense for the Texas Rangers is actually not going to be a free agent. It's going to be via trade with the Pittsburgh Pirates, being that of Brian Reynolds. He's an outfielder that can hit the long ball. He's really good at getting on base, and he's good in the outfield as well. That was the one reason why I thought Aaron Judge made a lot of sense for us, but obviously we wanted to spend money on our pitching as opposed to spending it more on hitting. So I could very well see a trade for Brian Edwards in the next month and a half. We have a very deep farm system. There's a part of me that feels that Jack Leiter might actually be on the move for them to go acquire another pitcher as well. So, but that's what I think we need is one more outfielder, and that player is Brian out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah, Brian Reynolds definitely could be a great fit. He's been linked to my team as well, but I will say this as a Yankee fan and someone who reads my fair share of articles with regard to the team and doing my own homework. I don't believe the New York Yankees are going to go in on Reynolds because I don't think they want to part with some of the pieces they currently have in the farm system. I think the way left field plays out for us is you're going to see a combination of Osvaldo Cabrera as well as Aaron Hicks. I think Aaron Hicks is going to be the extra outfielder. And if the Yankees were to blow up the farm system for one particular name, one particular player, the guy that I would justify doing that for is Fernando Tatis, because of the fact that he is kind of embattled. He missed all year with the injury on the motorcycle and then the PED thing. But being that he's so young and being that he's so hyper talented and being that the Padres are kind of top heavy. Yeah, they got a shit ton of offense, but they do need other things. If I'm the Yankees, that is the trade I make if you're going to do anything wild. You bring in Tatis, he instantly becomes your shortstop because in San Diego, he's already been phased out of short because of the emergence of Xander Bogaerts, former Red Sox, defending batting champion of the American League. Now he's in the NL. I believe that that is the route you go if you're the Yankees, if you're going to do something big. But, you know, the alternatives are not all that bad. You have options, and I don't think the Yankees have to go crazy. You don't need an all-star at every position to be successful. You need a healthy balance of guys that could contribute. Aaron Hicks is far from ideal, but I do believe that if he gets less at-bats and Cabrera emerges as your left fielder, you did okay. I don't forecast seeing Giancarlo Stanton doing too much work in left. I still think he's your regular DH. Pitching-wise, I don't think we need much. But if the Yankees also wanted to go for a bargain and get creative, I don't think bringing back Gary Sanchez to be your backup catcher, who's actually coming off a very good defensive year, that's been his criticism amongst baseball scouts, baseball people alike, to be your backup for Jose Trevino, maybe catch once a week, I think you could do worse than Gary Sanchez. He's definitely an upgrade over Ben Rortvedt and Kyle Higashioka. That's all I got on my New York Yankees. Baseball will be back soon.
I've got one for you. Where does Trevor Bauer end up?
That's a good question. I've thought about this quite a bit, actually. I could see him with the Padres, and I could see him with the Mets. Those are two teams that kind of jump out at me. There will be a contender that's going to sink a contract on this guy. I strongly know it won't be my team. I look at the AL East. I don't think anybody in the AL East is going to go for him. I really believe those are your two teams, the Padres or the Mets.
I see Seattle as one of the teams.
Maybe Seattle. Going back to the AL, he hasn't been in the AL for a while, but that's what I would say. Seattle to the Mets, maybe the Padres, but the Padres are my front runner out of the three teams that we mentioned together. Trevor Bauer, a lot of off-field controversy. I personally don't think he's worth the risk. And I also don't think he's as good as everybody thinks he is. Yes, he has a nice strikeout ratio, but that ERA is a little too robust for my liking. And the other reason why I know he wouldn't be a Yankee is because of the feud that is very real with Garrett Cole. So no, I don't see that. And plus, I don't think we need him. I like that what the Yankees have right now with 6 starters, but he can definitely help a team. I will not say that he can't. I just don't think it'll be with my New York team. I could see Uncle Stevie getting cute and bringing him in because I do believe that part of what the Mets like to do is steal the headlines. That is part of the warfare that they're playing with the Yankees, and I do believe that that is just as much of a motivation for them as hopefully winning more games and putting up some banners that don't say wild card on them. But
it all, honestly, with a Trevor Bauer, it almost feels like it would make more sense to go to a small market team, so there won't be such a large backlash by the franchise's fans, because a lot of people are really upset with his actions. There was a reason why he had such a long suspension that obviously
no, I get it. I get it, but I mean, there is that possibility that it could be a small market team, maybe a Minnesota. When you think,
that's where I was going with
you think that they need some pitching help, that's a understatement. Your team could use the pitching help, but I don't necessarily think going to Texas avoids the small market theory.
No, we don't need him. I don't want him.
Nah, I don't want him either. It's going to be interesting, though, to see how it plays out. Just to let the viewers know, at 6 p.m., we have our wild card weekend preview show. Zappy and I give you our picks for wild card weekend. And Zappy made a little mention that he believes that he would alter his picks. I'm going to go with him here on this one. Put it bluntly, the Baltimore Ravens and Miami Dolphins are going into their playoff games without their starters. That definitely hurts their chances, not to mention the familiarity because of the teams they're playing. Division rivals in both cases. But keep an eye out for that. It's going to be a great show coming up at 6 p.m. today. And I just wanted to say thanks for watching. This was a fun show. For my co-host, Mike, I am Richie, and we will be back in a few hours. Take it easy.